Good afternoon. My name is Nathaniel Morel. I am the Secretary for the National Puerto Rican Equality Coalition, or NAPREC. We excuse our chairman, Mr. Anthony Carrillo, who can't be present due to paramilitary commitments.
And I'm Dennis Freites, a NAPREC founding board member, Florida Veterans Hall of Fame, former trustee of Valencia College, former professor of military science, and director commander of U.S. Army Officer School, ROTC, at the Universidad de Puerto Rico, University of Puerto Rico, among other things. Also, I'm representing my father, Sergio Freites Menendez, and uncles Erasto and Anibal that served and fought with the U.S. 65th Infantry Regiment, the Borinqueniers, who were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, highest honor our U.S. Congress with U.S. President can bestow. They're from the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico, where other noble American veterans, warriors of good, don't have an equal U.S. citizenship or civil rights, but sacrifice our under federal discrimination and racism to defend our noble USA. Now to Nathaniel.
Now, NAPREC is a 501c4, a nonpartisan and non-governmental nonprofit organization based in Central Florida that aims to utilize utilize and unite citizens across the United States in civil action to empower, educate, and fight for the equality of Puerto Rico in the mainland. We are also strong advocates of full voting rights for Puerto Ricans who reside on the island through the admission of Puerto Rico as a state of the Union. We wish to thank everybody for joining us tonight on our newest episode of Equality Talks, this time focused on the role of academia in the fight for Puerto Rico.
Now, before I introduce our honored guest, here's a brief summary based on research facts, not political distortion, on unequal U.S. citizenship, civil rights, and Puerto Rico's unjust territorial status. Since 1898, the U.S. federal government undemocratically controls the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico, with more U.S. citizens than 21 states that have no federal consent of the governed, as patriots demand equal civil rights, fairness, revocation of unjust laws, a non-territorial, non-colonial status. Facts are today millions of second-class U.S. citizens, U.S. veterans in Puerto Rico, part of we the people, have no vote for U.S. president, no just representation in the U.S. Congress, no parity in federal laws, programs, or funding like in Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, veterans, infrastructure, education, emergency. No permanent statutory U.S. citizenship, even if moving to a state. Plus, the federal government controls Puerto Rico's borders, currency, laws, security, economy, trade, etc. Under the unjust territorial clause of 1787, racist insular cases of 1901, 1925, other unequal laws, where the U.S. Constitution is not fully applied to Puerto Rico, and that is a U.S. Supreme Court decision, and it's a fact. Unfairly going on for over 125 years. Besides, Puerto Rico's faced a magna crisis and exodus to the states, which major root components are economic, fiscal, infrastructure, social, and territorial status, where each part affects the other. The federal undemocratic status affects everything, brings instability, ties Puerto Rico's hand to fairly compete, grow the economy, limits progress, and goes against our U.S. democratic founding principles. The federal government should be the servant of all the people, not the master of some. The people with equal U.S. citizenship rights come first, not a separate and unequal status. In our U.S. Republic, the power resides with all we the people, made up by individuals. Per our Declaration of Independence, that calls for consent of the governed. Noble U.S. Constitution that calls for equal rights, fairness, and a Republican form of government, or a representative democracy. A government of the people, by the people, and for the people, like Lincoln said. No federal vote results in no democracy. Even if one U.S. citizen individual doesn't have full rights, it's one too many. The federal government can end this unjust inequity now, but has not done so. Instead, some generalize, provide biased excuses that blame the victim, are closet racist, create double standards not applied to other U.S. territories before Puerto Rico. This results in a stalemate that perpetuates federal subjugation. Silence to discrimination supports injustice. You can't have it both ways. Either support equal rights or you allow federal discrimination or the tyranny of a majority. To fix this, our federal government must ensure equal U.S. citizenship, rights for all we the people. Do a plebiscite with properly defined and binding non-territorial options, which are statehood versus independence, without or with a free association pact. We in NAPREC think Puerto Rico equality and progress with statehood is the best option. In our union of states, each state is stronger than by itself, complements other states with progress for the good of all. Also, all states have their own identity. Puerto Rico can keep its Jibar identity, constitution, flag, and state sovereignty, which Puerto Rico does not have. En la unión está la fuerza. Only statehood guarantees permanent statutory U.S. citizenship, as the U.S. Constitution laws end upon independence. Statutory U.S. citizens by territorial clause, Jones Act of 1917, in the states have a stake in the fight, as they can lose their non-permanent statutory U.S. citizenship. Thus, the U.S. Congress must let them vote in any plebiscite or naturalize those in Puerto Rico per 14th Amendment. Equality for a more perfect union. All are patriotically called to civic action for fairness, justice, support a Hispanic, Puerto Rican, American patriotic just cause. And that's our summary. We always begin with that because this is our focus and this is our mission. Now, I have great pleasure and a great honor we have with us Dr. Fernando Rivera, who is a distinguished professor of sociology at the UCF, University of Central Florida, where he is also the founding director of the Puerto Rico Research Hub that has established valuable sociology research programs in the fields of health, race, ethnicity, and disaster. And I happened to be with Dr. Rivera last night. We had a very good seminar on Ukraine by Lieutenant General Hodges. And there we talked about the needs of the hub. The Puerto Rico Research Hub needs our strong support. They need volunteers and monetary through UCF Foundation so it can conduct more studies on the Puerto Rican populations that are key to Puerto Rican inclusion, equality, and progress, a better quality of life. For more information, please go to the Puerto Rico Research Hub site, which I think, Dr. Rivera, it's global.ucf.edu/Puerto Rico. If I'm wrong, please correct it. But we must really, Dr. Rivera is doing an amazing work there. And I was very impressed last night. And but we need to support him. If not, we're not going to have the quality of research that Dr. Rivera can do. Dr. Fernando Rivera, which the more I know, the more I admire. Thank you for joining us today. Please provide some introductory remarks.
All right, now you figure out it's been like 3 years of this virtual thing, but thank you so much for having me. Sorry, I was muted before, but thank you so much for your kind words and the introduction. And as you say, if you want to know more about what we do any browser or search agent, you can put UCF Puerto Rico Research Hub, and we're gonna pop up out there. So I look forward to the conversation and talk a little bit about Puerto Rico, Puerto Ricans here in Florida, and sort of what the academy can do, sort of in resolving this long-standing issue with Puerto Rico.
Okay, good. Well, for those viewers that are unfamiliar with what the Puerto Rico Research Hub is, can you provide us some introduction to the program? What's its
Absolutely.
role?
So we started in 2018. We just celebrated our 5th anniversary, and we're the center of activities dedicated to the study of Puerto Rico and Puerto Ricans at the University of Central Florida. And we sort of, our mission is divided into 4 activities, main activities that we do. So we do research, and that mostly has concentrated on health and disasters. Obviously, those are key kind of issues that are going on the island, but also for the Puerto Rican population here in Central Florida as well. Another key aspect of what we do is provide students with an opportunity to engage in research. So we've been very successful in providing those opportunities for students to really embark in the research endeavors out here. And we have had students that have published book chapters, have completed dissertations, undergrad thesis, all that type of research that actually brings out to the intellectual community, and we provide that kind of research that talks about some of the issues of Puerto Rico. So I'm very happy with what we've been able to provide with students. Another thing that we do is we have an outreach mission, which is basically what I'm doing today. Basically what we learned, talk to our friends and different groups, and basically provide that information, right? We have a podcast. We, sort of willingly or unwillingly, we have become kind of like that voice of Puerto Rican issues in Central Florida. Some from politics, disaster, health, anything and everything that has to do with Puerto Rico, we have been able to provide that academic expertise and sort of not necessarily my opinion as an individual, but what is the research telling us that we can share with different members of the community. And lastly, we do partnerships, which is, again, another big aspect of what we do. So we partner with other research centers, with other universities. We always collaborate, have good collaborations with the Center for Puerto Rican Studies over at Hunter College. We collaborate with the University of Puerto Rico. We collaborate with nonprofits locally and also in Puerto Rico. We work with chambers of commerce, and we do all type of programs because based on the research and the exposure that we have with the community, we are able to listen and provide services and programs to the community. So from, programs such as the Puerto Rico Baseball Day. Puerto Rico has a strong tradition on baseball, and we had never celebrated that at the university. So for the past 2 years, we team up with Major League Baseball, and they have a playbook clinic. They come here. They bring former Puerto Rican baseball players. Carlos Baerga has been with us in the last 2 Puerto Rico Baseball Days out here. So the kids come to campus. They get to interact and see campus, and they go to a baseball game and get that feeling out there. We also provide different type of resources for the community in terms of business training programs, English language instruction, basic statistics, all anything and everything that has to do with Puerto Ricans and also our other Latino communities here in Central Florida. So that's kind of like in a nutshell what we do. Obviously, we do more than that, but that's kind of like the 4 principal things that we do at the Puerto Rico Research Hub.
Oh, no, it's a very important it's a very important job that you bring facts and numbers into the community, to the academic community as a whole, about the Puerto Rican population in the mainland and specifically in Central Florida. But based on my own experience, the the Puerto Rican population in Florida is growing at an exponential rate. Most Puerto Ricans in Central Florida, based again on my own observations, are coming directly from Puerto Rico. Many others are moving from other states, coming to Florida because of multiple benefits, including the weather and the job factor and real estate. Speaking in general terms, what are the top three priorities that the UCF Puerto Rico Research Hub has right now?
Well, yeah. So some of the priorities, obviously, some of the things that Dennis was referring at the beginning, kind of like the issue of sustainability, right? I think we have been very successful in the last 5 years, but we want to make sure that this lasts forever. That it's not only like a 5-year project or anything like that. So sustainability is the number one issue that we have. Secondly, is building capacity. We just recently received some appropriations money from Representative Soto through the Department of Education, and that going to allow us to do some research, build the capacity of our students, build capacity to continue to do polling on the community, do different exchanges with students from Puerto Rico and bring them here, and actually bring students from UCF also to Puerto Rico. And the third one is continuing serve that outreach mission to make sure that all those topics are out there. I think that, so the third big issue is visibility, right? Even though we've been around for 5 years, we want to make sure that everybody knows what we do. We've been, fairly successful. I mean, I write fairly often to El Nuevo Dia in Puerto Rico. So, and that's sort of the sort of information for some of the politicians and decision makers out there. We visited with the legislature in Puerto Rico. Obviously, we've hosted the governor out here. So we try to keep a good relationship out here, but increase that visibility so people know what we do and that they can find us for the information that people need.
And
Well,
sorry, Dennis. One more question before moving to Dennis is what has been the most surprising fact about the Puerto Rican population in Florida that you have discovered in your research? This is more of like a side question that I have for you.
No, well, I would, for sometimes, you're involved in research and the growing numbers and all these issues out here. What I did find very surprising is that few people know how many Puerto Ricans are in Florida or in Central Florida. And even politicians, when they come here, they really don't have a grasp of how strong the diaspora is here, right? They figure, they throw out numbers and all those type of things. But I think the most interesting fact so far is like in 2017, we flipped. So Florida became the largest state outside of Puerto Rico with the majority of Puerto Ricans. So right now, if you look at the numbers to 2022, in Florida, there's about 1.2 and a little bit more Puerto Ricans, almost 1.3 million. And when you look at New York, it's less than 1 million. So there's been a fundamental shift in the center of migration or population movement from Puerto Rico, but also from New York as well. So I think that that's been a very surprising fact out here of how much this has changed. And this is in a span of 12 years. So it's been sort of population wise, that's a significant population change in 12 years. And obviously we know about the financial crisis, we know about the hurricanes, we know about those issues. So not surprising, but when you see those numbers, really impacts you and on how large and how important is what we do for this growing sector of the population here in Central Florida and in the state of Florida.
you're done, Nathaniel?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry I cut you off, but I just wanted to take an opportunity to
It's okay.
ask, the matter expert. All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Rivera. Dr. Rivera, you have been with UCF for about 18 years. When you decided to join the university, you were a postdoctoral researcher at Rutgers in New Jersey. Can you share your story and why did you choose to move to Orlando and join UCF?
Absolutely. So let me even backtrack a little bit. So I did my undergrad at the University of Puerto Rico, Mayagüez Colegio. So I was the social scientist at the engineering school, right? But I was very fortunate that I had a great group of faculty that really emphasized on research when I was in Puerto Rico. And just talk about the caliber of people that were my initial professors, so sort of the foundation of my scholarship, was Avidan Rodriguez, Dr. Avidan Rodriguez, which he is the first Puerto Rican president of the state university system in New York. So he's president in Albany right now. Also, Alfonso Latoni, he's a program director at the National Institutes out there. So that type of quality professorship was what I was exposed to in Puerto Rico. Obviously, when it came time to grad school, I did my grad school in Nebraska, of all places. Right? And did that for a while, did that for 2 years, came back to the University of, actually, I was an adjunct at the University of Puerto Rico in 1998. And if you remember, those years were a little testy because it was a 100-year anniversary. And, all the things that were going on in Culebra and Vieques and all that good stuff out there. So eventually I returned to Nebraska. And after Nebraska, I did a postdoc at Rutgers. And at the time that I did the postdoc, that was at the Institute for Health, Healthcare Policy, and Aging Research, which was funded through the National Institute of Mental Health. A lot of the beginning of my work is looking at, the mental health issues among the Latino communities and differentials between different Latino groups out there. But that opportunity was great because I got to work with the people I was reading for my dissertation, all those type of things. And it allowed me to sort of build that scholarship out here. But I knew, I was looking at the numbers, and I knew that Orlando was the place that it was growing. And we were talking, this is back in 2003. And I had a colleague, another grad student that actually got a job at UCF before I did. And, it was the time of growth for UCF. When I came to UCF in 2005, the university was large. It was about 40,000 students. Now we're almost to 69,000, right? And if you haven't been to campus, all the stadiums, dorms, half of it wasn't there when I started here. I remember that, people said like the biggest population on campus was people from Ohio, right? And how has that changed? But I knew that there were, the population growth was happening, and this was a place to be to really study Puerto Rican issues, because this was the next center of that epicenter of the population movement that was going to happen. And what do you know? Sometimes the demographic numbers do not lie, and that's the case right now. Right now, this is by far the epicenter of the Puerto Rican population in the 50 states.
Okay, well, that's a very interesting career and very good way to choose moving to Orlando. So, and I believe that the weather probably also impacted you, especially coming from a place that was probably cold, and now moving to sunny Florida was also a plus. So, well, we're gonna move a little bit to the topic of Puerto Rican recovery. Can you share any studies conducted by the Puerto Rico Research Hub on efforts to highlight that important issue, how Puerto Rico is, what facts, statistics you have based on the sociology perspective on how Puerto Rico is recovering following the Hurricane Maria, Irma, following the earthquakes in the south, and plus the COVID pandemic, all those disasters in a very short period of time, in addition to the perennial economic depression and debt restructuring that Puerto Rico has been going since the middle of the last decade. How is Puerto Rico recovering based on the perspective of sociology research?
Well, yes. So right after Hurricane Maria, there was a lot of interest on studying Puerto Rico and what had happened. So we had the opportunity I was a special editor for population and environment. And we look at the population of Puerto Rico before and after Hurricane Maria, right? And that was very interesting in terms of how we measure kind of like that population movement. And I think, some of the highlights of that research that we were able to sort of edit and sort of provide a platform to do so was the idea that if the conditions did improve out here, people were going to return, and actually that did happen, right? In the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Maria, probably in the 6 months, we had a lot of people from Puerto Rico coming to the 50 states. But eventually, when things did improve in Puerto Rico, slowly but surely, that people started to move back. And that's from historical studying other disasters. That's usually the case. And usually, Puerto Ricans are very they will follow economic opportunities. So and that's very related to your question, right? In terms of if we're able to provide those economic opportunities that are sustainable and they are realistic, I'm sure you can. Puerto Ricans are going to follow sort of that trajectory in terms of that. We also had the opportunity to do another special edition of the Journal of Emergency Management, looking at some of the things that actually, the pre and post disaster in terms of that. Obviously, we knew that, the issue of emergency management wasn't well defined during the storm. There was no emergency plans. There was a lot of downfalls out here. But, from that research, we also found that, the needle has moved in a different way, right? That there's more emphasis on putting emergency plans, preparedness for different storms, and we know that that's getting a little bit better. It's not perfect whatsoever. I'm not saying that whatsoever. We had a test run last year, and it didn't look as well in terms of that. And we also try to look at what are some of the issues with the debt and Promesa and the board, and obviously looking at COVID as well. We did some research of what we saw were gonna be the consequences of COVID, particularly in an older population that we have in Puerto Rico right now. If you look at the numbers, almost a quarter, almost a third of the population is the expectation that they're 65 and older. So that creates a lot of pressures to the economy because we're losing young people in Puerto Rico. We have people with chronic disease. We have a healthcare system that has a lot of stresses. And how do we account for that? And when we're talking about the issues of equality and access to services and all sort of stuff, we see that there's big differences out there. But one of the things that, and this is actually one of the from the master thesis from one of my students, is and when we're talking about equality, right? First, when the COVID disaster happened, and Puerto Rico was able to have the same benefits as any state in terms of access to vaccination, in terms of access to resources, all those type of things. So what happened? Puerto Rico was a shining example of containing the disease. The highest percentage of vaccinations, social distances, all that sort of stuff. And what we thought, even me, in our research, we thought this is going to be the last straw of Puerto Rico, right? All the indicators of risk factors are the ones that Puerto Rico have, but that wasn't the case. So I think that that's one of the research studies that really show that when given the equal opportunities, Puerto Rico can actually take care of their things and actually excel and shine out here. And that's the story we haven't told that much, right? In terms of that. And, even if you compare Florida to Puerto Rico did such a much better job in making sure that the mortality was low, that the infection rate was lower, that people in Puerto Rico, people took it seriously. And, we kind of argue that was a consequence of all this series of very serious events out here. And people were saying I'm not going to let COVID, I survived Maria. I'm not going to let COVID be the last drop out here, and we're going to do all those sort of things. So that was very reassuring, and that's some of the things that we continue to do research upon. Obviously, on the health side, the emergency management side, and we continue to do so. In terms of what are the benefits of all these financial incentives and the debt and all those type of things, and and really pushing for more clarity and access to public records, which still continue to be an issue that we need to push for, not only here in Florida, but also in Puerto Rico as well, because sometimes it's very difficult to get the data.
And in your opinion, I know that we have multiple facts multiple events that were pushing people to move from Puerto Rico to the States. But in your opinion, why do you think most Puerto Ricans from the island chose to move to Florida and not to the other states that are well known for Puerto Rico population? Or why they didn't choose just to move to another country that accepted them because of their visa? And because there's some ease of travel as American citizens that they could move to another country, but they still decided to move to Florida um, instead of moving to New York, to Illinois, to Michigan, to move to Pennsylvania. Why did they choose Florida over any other place in the States or any other place in the world, in your opinion, at least?
Well, no, and even from the research, right? If you look at it, Florida became the third largest state in the nation. It's one of the states that continues to grow. So if you follow population patterns, the Northeast is losing population by the minute, and that's including the Puerto Rican population in New York. So there's a dwindling population out there in New York. There's less economic opportunities. People are moving south of New York. Even places like Pennsylvania, all the sort of things. So there's I think there's like a cultural aspect of it, right? I think Orlando is sort of that entry point to the 50 states for Puerto Rico, right? It's growing up on the island, going to Disney was sort of the consequential trip for everyone, right? People didn't go to Philadelphia or New York and all sorts of people go to Disney, right? So there's obviously a connection out there in terms of that. But we know that, obviously there's a tax base that is a little bit more reduced in terms of real estate prices when you compare it to other states. So that's a factor as well. I think also here, which is a plus and a negative at the same time, there's a lot of jobs, entry-level jobs that people can take on. You can, have a job within 2 days when you come here, right? So there's a lot of availability of jobs out here. Whether those are sustainable, that's the big issue that we are dealing with here in Central Florida in terms of being in the service economy. But there's and one of the things that we also find out in terms of looking at this demographic patterns. People will go where there's a lot of people that look like you, act like you, all those type of things. And if you look, even if you trace back the history of Puerto Ricans in the state of Florida, we think it's relatively new, but it's not. Puerto Ricans have been coming to the state for a long time, even from the cigar factories in Tampa in the beginning of the century. To World War II, that people participated in the Air Force, and it's MCO is International Airport, but that's McCovey Air Force Air Base, former military base out there that was transformed into an airport. Obviously, the space program attracted a lot of engineers from the University of Puerto Rico as well. So that was, there's been a shift out here. There's been a history of Puerto Rico and Florida that goes back more than we think it has. Obviously now with the ease of transportation and all those type of things, it's not like 1940s and La Guagua area or anything like that, right? Now you can it's more easily out here, and there's some more connections with that. And obviously we knew the financial crisis was a big push factor for a lot of people in Puerto Rico, right? Fortunately, when tax law 936 was sunset, we saw the consequences of that. And a lot of people, and the fiscal mismanagement and sort of the issue education is a big draw also for a lot of people to move here. Obviously, all the things that you said, weather and, more familiarity with the area and stuff like that. Those are factors as well. But those are very strong draws out here. I mean, it's not only Puerto Ricans at the end of the day. Florida keeps attracting people from all over the world. And we're just part of that movement of people that actually are moving to Florida as well. So,
well, thank you. That was great. When Puerto Rico is treated equally, Puerto Rico shines, like you said during the pandemic. Thank you for those words. Now let's move to the efforts on the island. Can you talk about the efforts of what the Puerto Rico Hub is doing in the island to partner and collaborate with governmental and NGOs, that's non-governmental organizations, to support Puerto Rico?
Absolutely. So we've been able to, every time we go to Puerto Rico, we meet with different nonprofits. So one of my favorites is Protechos. Protechos is a small nonprofit, and what they do is that they fix blue roofs, right? Los techos azules. But what they do is not only fix the roof, they train people to be carpenters. They provide tools with the community to really empower themselves. So that's one of the nonprofits that we always collaborate with, and we keep trying to get research funding and all those type of things, and we visit with them often, and we're starting to do some more specific things to help them out. We also have an agreement with the Graduate School of Planning at the University of Puerto Rico. So kind of like, obviously planning is so important to the issues that are going on in Puerto Rico. So we're developing an academic magazine that is going to be open to the public. It's going to be in an online format, but it's going to open, sort of give a platform to scholars in the US, Puerto Rico, Latin America, and Europe to talk about the issues of planning and other related issues out there. We also have been in talks with Albizu University, looking at issues of mental health as well. We have a lot of ties with different things. We visited different representatives in Puerto Rico as well. We've been to the legislature, talk about some of the issues. We hosted a job fair from the Department of Housing in Puerto Rico here in Florida. So with the reconstruction funds, people could come here and apply for a job here at UCF, at the Puerto Rico Research Hub, to find a job to help with the reconstruction in Puerto Rico. So we have good relationships out there in terms of that with the Department of Vivienda and with all the funds out here we maintain out here. And one of our graduates, Jose Luis Rivera, is working out there as well. So I think one of the big keys of what being able to do, at the time that we have the students, I have a lot of students that were displaced by Hurricane Maria. They came here, graduated from UCF, and went back to Puerto Rico. And I think that's the great promise that we're doing out here, that we can train, establish those connections, establish that bridge out here in terms of how we can collaborate between each other. And obviously, I think for both of us, it's very important the future of Puerto Rico, and there's a connection between the two, right? If the conditions don't improve in Puerto Rico, people are going to continue to find a way to survive those conditions. And as we have discussed, it's going to be here. So we have to be ready also to take on that responsibility as well, and provide those tools and those assets and those opportunities that can really help for the future of Puerto Rico.
Dr. Rivera, talking about a little bit more about the Puerto Rican population on the island, something that is worrying me is that, and I'm a part of it, a lot of my colleagues that went to graduate level education in Puerto Rico moved to the States, especially to Florida. And I see
Go ahead.
I see too often that the youngest generations that are able to bear children, create a family, participate into the economy, are leaving the island on a high numbers. We are also seeing on the census that the other territories are experiencing something similar, in that a lot of their population is also moving, if they're able to move into the mainland. What worries me is that at some point, if this trend continues, Puerto Rico as a jurisdiction will have a very difficult time being productive, being able to, their tax base will probably shrink. And to a point, is this something that you also worry? I mean, is it the same issue as we saw with the debt? Everybody saw it 8 years before it all happened, until it happened, and nothing was really done about it until the very end. And we saw the consequences of managing something that everybody saw like a slow train coming in, and nobody dared to move. And this is another issue that we're facing, that the youngest segments of the Puerto Rican population are moving to the mainland. The other territories appear to have something similar. Maybe the only state that is experiencing something similar is West Virginia. And to me, on a sociology wise perspective, is very worrisome. What do you think about that aspect?
No, obviously, that for the economic future of Puerto Rico, because right now Puerto Rico is doing well because of the outrageous amount of federal funds that have been dedicated to the island, right? But those eventually are going to go away. So you have to build a sustainable path for the future. I remain hopeful that those the young generation that decides to stay or return to Puerto Rico are going to change the reign out there in terms of that. But this is sort of in a sociological sense. That's something that's happening in Puerto Rico, but that's happening in other places as well. If you think about that's literally happening in Japan, that's happening in Spain, that's happening in Italy, that's even happening in China, right? Where we have those demographic shifts where you don't have a lot of population replacement. And when you look at more globally and more sociologically, in a sense, the majority of growth of the population in the world is happening in developing countries. So we're talking Africa, India. Those are kind of like the centers of where people are younger out there in terms of that. But that is something that I believe that the economists in Puerto Rico and even people out here are looking into that, because like I said before, those create a lot of stressors for the system out there, and it's an unsustainable path, right? But I think Puerto Rico has the opportunity right now, with the amount of funds that are available, to really transform Puerto Rico into something different, right? Where you have more access to technological things, better roads, better infrastructure, better capacity, better governance, and all those type of things, right? And I think we need to push and those things actually happening. But at the end of the day, we know that politics are strong in Puerto Rico, and sometimes the what we wish is the best is happening. Sometimes we get into that whole old habits out here, and that's an issue of concern out there. And again, it's something that is happening in other places as well. But that's a key factor here in Puerto Rico. Can we are able to resolve our political differences and work united towards a better Puerto Rico? And I think right now we have to reimagine, right? What Puerto Rico do we want? What Puerto Rico do we have? And maybe in the short term, we need to dedicate some resources to really take care of their older population in Puerto Rico, and basically create the infrastructure so they can actually survive out here in terms of that, in terms of providing, basic health resources, but also infrastructure, in terms of sidewalks and ramps and all sort of things. That's something that is happening. Affordable housing, all those type of things. So Puerto Rico has a great challenge, has the funding, whether it will have the political will and the unity to do so. That remains to be the issue. We're 6 years out, and progress has gone more slowly than anybody anticipated. And obviously, nobody anticipated that Puerto Rico was going to have earthquakes and a major pandemic in the middle of that, right? I think people don't realize that the pandemic did a number of in terms of the expectation for construction projects, right? When the shipment of things did actually change, and the price of things did actually change a lot. A lot of the bidding had to be done again, and the prices increase and all sort of things. So there's Puerto Rico. The lack of speed in the recovery has sort of met the global realities that keep changing every day, right? And I think that there has to be a better sense of urgency out here. And I know they're doing a lot of projects out there, but they have to be faster. And I think there has to be a better sense of urgency, because those funds eventually are going to run out. And then, as you mentioned, if you're losing your young population, if you're losing the people in your productive years, there has to be another strategy, because you're not going to simply have enough people in Puerto Rico to really have the economic future that everybody wants for the island.
Right. I mean, and to be honest, most of the federal funding that is propping up the economy of Puerto Rico right now was granted to Puerto Rico because of the clout of the Puerto Rican population on the mainland that are able to vote and have representation in Congress, which probably Dennis will also agree with me. It shows you that having the power to vote for members of Congress and especially your senators, will allow you not only to get the allocations of federal funding to allow you to recover from the many of the disasters that we face, but it will also help you to move along the bureaucracy of the federal government that tends to be, by design, slow. And unfortunately, Puerto Rico, not having any senator of their own and not having any voting member in Congress, probably will have a more slow recovery than if you were to compare it to another state. In addition to multiple fiscal factors that probably slow down, the matching of the funds and other things, and their own local bureaucracy. So, bringing this subject to light, I wanted to discuss Florida. Florida has now become the leading state in Puerto Rican population, just as you stated, that we have more than 1.2 million Puerto Ricans on the state. However, during the past elections, the Boricua vote, the turnout was low. It was a midterm election, but it was still low by even those standards. Can you give, based on your research, can you give your take? Have there been any studies on how about these matters and why the Puerto Rican voter that resides in Florida is not turning out to participate into elections? And I read a statistic that actually disclosed the Boricua vote that tends to be, and again, I'm unable to cite a source here, but what I saw from a news article, that around 40% tend to vote Republican and 60% tends to vote Democrat on the last election. So it's not a monolithic block. So we have some diversity there. Can you explain a little bit of your research on this aspect?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of the challenges, even in getting information about the Puerto Rican vote, right? And just for the audience and to know how those numbers come about, right? We don't have the infrastructure as other states that you can easily identify, voters that are Puerto Rican, right? The thing that we have here is black, white, and Hispanic and Asian, and kind of like those categories out there. So usually what they do an exit polling. So they go to, they interview people as they exit the polls, and from that they sort of figure out how many people have done in terms of that. I can certainly speculate some of the things of what's happening in terms of that. And again, sometimes we think the patterns are exclusively to Puerto Ricans, but it's not. Usually, unfortunately, in the United States, people don't go to vote that often. And that's kind of like a pattern of behavior that Puerto Ricans, as they integrate into the American system, they tend to follow, right? We know that in Puerto Rico, the voting percentage is very, very high. And there's some issues out here. I think for the ones that came from the island because of the politics that actually forced them to get out of the island, they don't want to deal with politics, right? They don't see the value of it. They want to run away from it. This is a complete different system, right? In Puerto Rico, you could, una cruz bajo whatever, right? And that was it, right? It was a free day, all those type of things. Here you have elections all the time. You elect judges, you elect mayors, city council, you select
the sheriff,
county council, sheriffs, all those type of things, right? So it becomes a very complicated type of deal in terms of that. But I think that there's a level of frustration for a lot of people that they don't want to deal with politics, right? It's like, I'm done with the politics. They never did anything to me back in Puerto Rico, and actually, I'm kind of like out of Puerto Rico because of the decisions that the government that we chose made the wrong decisions, right? There's in terms of that, and obviously, there's outside of a few campaigns out here, the outreach sometimes is not as strong as we like it to be. I think in the 2020 elections, we did see a strong catering to the Puerto Rican population. I remember even hearing, and I wrote a manuscript about it, and it's under review right now. But kind of like looking at, the Orlando Sentinel had what were the top issues for Floridians in the presidential elections, and you know what topic came up? Puerto Ricans in 2020, right? That we were one of the topics of the main topics of discussion that Floridians were concerned about. And obviously, we saw, President Trump and President Biden came to Kissimmee, came to the area, did all the type of pandering out here. But at the end of the day, in the issue of, a lot of promises have been made, but never being fulfilled. And I think that's the other frustration as well, right? I think there's a lot of frustration out here. It's like, hey, here we come again. 6 months before the election, we got a politician. Oh, whatever Puerto Ricans want, I'm going to deliver, and it's going to be great. And people go and vote, and then they don't deliver, and there's no accountability, right? We keep sort of promoting that same cycle in terms of that. And again, I think that, there's different, as you mentioned, in terms of the diversity of the vote out here. I think politicians are finding out that, there are some topics of importance for Puerto Ricans, that are local issues that people care about. When we did some polling about the issues that Puerto Ricans in Florida did care more about, it was the economy. It was health. It was those type of issues, right? So not necessarily taking a picture with a former politician from Puerto Rico and say that's my level of outreach that we have out here, or have like a Google Translate campaign flyer and said like, hey, I got the Hispanic vote because I just did that, right? In terms of that, and things are getting a little bit better. Actually, I was doing sort of a content analysis of the last election and sort of comparing before the other election, and the language got better and a little bit, and it was Puerto Rican English or Puerto Rican Spanish. Kind of like the ads were just emphasized out there. So there's a lot. There's a lot of places to do, but I think there has to be constant outreach from everybody, not only education but outreach. Why you should vote, why you should care about the issues, and not necessarily the Band-Aid type of outreach that both political powers have done in the past. And I think that that's an issue that a lot of people get off put by the election.
And you think Puerto Ricans in Florida, they're different from Puerto Ricans in New York or Chicago when it comes to politics, to the question of status? Have you seen a difference, or we're all just a single, mostly the same block in the mainland?
No, I mean, if you looked at the Status Act, the ones that were proposed, it gives you kind of like a hint, right, in terms of where the Puerto Rican, the Florida Puerto Rican population stood, which is a majority statehood. We can say that with a high level of confidence that it was different from the New York bloc, right? So those were the competing challenges. If you kind of like do the political analysis out here in terms of that, kind of like Nidia Velázquez and AOC, they wanted to have the independence type of option, the Commonwealth, all those type of things, right? And you saw kind of like that clash, and it tells you a little bit of the differences out here in terms of, what the Puerto Rican Florida population is thinking and what the New York delegation was thinking. So I think that was a clear example that there's different expectations out here. And unfortunately, I don't think there's a united front yet that would say like, hey, we're 100% in favor of X or Y. There's still a little bit of division, not only here in the 50 states, but also in Puerto Rico. And I think that's a very convenient excuse for a lot of politicians said like, hey, and you heard it from some senators out here that said, hey, when you resolve it, I'll back you up, but as long as you keep fighting for a decision there's nothing I can do, right? So that's a line that has been used and reused and used and reused. And unless something dramatically happens, it's going to continue to hamper sort of the result of the status in the future.
I think the only consensus everywhere is that the current status is not working for anybody. And if you're pro-independence, pro-statehood, or pro-free association, the only thing that we agree is that the current territory doesn't work. Dennis, sorry to cut you
Okay.
off.
I've heard a lot of distortion, a lot of misinformation. Number one, our U.S. Constitution, Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. Under the insular cases, which are racist, Puerto Rico is an unincorporated territory. Puerto Rico, according to the Constitution, ELA, Estado Libre Asociado, or Free Associated State, is just a name that has no legal meaning and should not be used, or free association, because they confuse the people that are going to vote. So there's a lot of confusion, and you talked about other things, and so there's a lot of political distortion. And one of the things that the hub can do is shine the light on the truth. And maybe you can do some research on this, say, hey, this is what the Constitution says, this is the truth. Estado Libre Asociado is not a status, it's just a feel-good name for the government of Puerto Rico. The status under the Constitution is U.S. territory, as upheld by almost all the U.S. Supreme Court decisions. So will the UCF Puerto Rico Hub do critical research and provide the facts, possible solutions to resolve the federal undemocratic control of the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico? Because the federals are controlling Puerto Rico in an undemocratic fashion. If there is no vote, there is no democracy. If there's no just representation, there is no democracy. That negatively affects, and taking out the political distortion, clutter, smog, and shining the light, that negatively affects everything that Puerto Rico does, especially the economy, creation of jobs. If you can get more funding, obviously, will the hub, study this issue more?
So, one of the things, there's a cadre of scholars that are doing this work that we have sort of partnered up with them to really support them in their efforts, right? In the legal front, our good partner, Neil Ware from Democracy Now! Is doing that work.
Very good,
and we've been able to bring him into campus to shine some light on this. He's been able to be in one of our PBS, award-winning PBS show, Global Perspective, and kind of like talk about those issues out here. So in that level, we've been able to partner up and bring and shine a light on these aspects to not only the UCF community, but the Central Florida community out here. And these are people that are doing their work. And I want, so obviously we want to concentrate our efforts into, seeing what areas or gaps of research we're not doing. And in the areas that already there's research that's been done, sort of identify those partners that we can rely on them to give us the information so we can give the information to the people and use them at their resource. So I'm very happy with our collaboration with Neil, and we have been able to bring him on campus, talk to different constituents out here on campus, and sort of keep that pressure out here. And obviously we talk to other groups, some Washington based groups that actually talk about this. So the Center for the New Economy, we get along well with Federico de Jesus that had to look at these issues as well. Some other like Philip Arroyo that has done some other type of research, necessarily not pushing for sale, not necessarily, but talking about these issues. So there's a lot of people that are concentrating their efforts out there. And at the capacity that we can, we continue to bring those resources one way or the other so we can have a conversation, so people have that information. Because still, if I've learned one thing, is that we should not assume that people know about Puerto Rico and Puerto Rican issues. And I'm not talking about the U.S., sort of the non-Puerto Rican population. I'm talking about the Puerto Rican population, which I've lost. I do not assume that people know anything that I know in terms of the number of Puerto Ricans, about the issues and all sort of stuff. And that's the lesson learned, right? This is a constant battle. Just because you had one talk doesn't mean that you're done. This is a constant, consistent effort. If we really want to resolve these issues, we need to be on the ball 24/7, because it's not going to resolve itself. And you know how the media cycles work and all those type of things. For a year, we followed the news from Puerto Rico, and unfortunately, we're not the center of focus for any media outlet out there, outside of a disaster, outside of a scandal. The issue of Puerto Rico is not a topic of interest to a lot of people. So that's why groups like yours, that's why here at the Puerto Rico Research Hub, we want to make sure that we elevate you, that we give you that space, so we continue to bring about that discussion. Because if we don't do it, nobody's going to do it, and it has to be constant.
That is correctly right. We got to educate, shine the light on the truth, and that is my mission. I mean, if you prove to me something I said is not right, hey, I'll change. There's some fanatics out there that are not willing to do that. There's some fanatics out there that will provide political distortion. And my good friend Arroyo, I know him way back when he was with the Secretary of State, McClintock. He's a good guy, I'm not going to, but the independence people don't want a plebiscite. Why don't they just say, let's have a plebiscite? They're just trying to force independence por la cocina, and that's not going to happen, because Puerto Ricans don't want to lose their U.S. citizenship. Puerto Rican have voted in about 4 different plebiscites. There's always people that attack them, but that is the law. They were certified. They have voted for statehood. Independence never gets 4 or 5% of that vote. So the people have voted in Puerto Rico. Now it's Congress' turn to do something. So do you support Congress doing a plebiscite on non-territorial status? And that means statehood versus independence, with or without a pact of free association. That is it. There's nothing in the Constitution that allows for something else, and the U.S. Congress is not above the U.S. Constitution to create and enhance ELA or all these other things. That only causes stalemate. We've been stalemated for 125 years. It's frustrating. So do you support, there's currently HR 2757 in the U.S. Congress. It needs, it's the Puerto Rico Status Act. It needs some amendments to the definitions, because they're saying sovereignty with free association. That's not the status. That's the name of the pact. The name of the status is independence with sovereignty with free association pact. You got to put it right. You got to put it what it is. You have to be like Palau, the Marshall Islands, and Micronesia. They're independent nations that have free association with the United States. And you can't have all the benefits and all the rights and have sovereignty, national sovereignty, like some people want. So we must shine the light on the truth. And 2757 is one of those. Do you support that?
Well, obviously I cannot take, as director, I cannot take a position in favor or against any type of legislation. But I will say kind of like my sociological.
But do you support a general plebiscite that allows the Puerto Rican people to decide their fate and let them vote? Do you support letting the Puerto Rican people vote on a non-territorial status? It doesn't have to be 2757.
No, I mean, and the sad reality is that that's not up to Puerto Rican people. That's up to Congress. And I'm fully knowing how Congress works, fully knowing that corporations have the same rights as individuals. I think a strategy that could be used, can we raise enough funds to start lobbying campaigns of politicians so they actually support this type of measures, right? I think that's where the solution might be. I think for years we've been talking about the will of the Puerto Rican people, but in most cases, we tried everything, right? So I think there has to be a reimagining of what can we do realistically, fully knowing how Congress works, to make sure that these things get across, right? Because we know that there are lesser issues that are passing Congress more efficiently and quickly, and that are highly more controversial than this. And it has to get to a point of understanding how do we get to that level, and who do we need to bring to really shift the conversation, not only educate but also understand how the political system in the United States work, and sort of push Congress to that brink. And I think that that's sort of the uncertain future that we have, but the opportunity that we have, right, in terms of combining all the assets that we have. But it cannot be just one individual asset at the time and trying to battle a big battle, to battle a ginormous effort out there. So we need to have some unity. We need to have some accountability of the people that promise things and they don't really deliver. Whether it's voting or not voting, we need to understand better how the political system works. We need to get more engaged in the campaigns, and we need to get more engaged in the way politics actually work, both here in Puerto Rico and both in the United States. So, yeah.
We also have to move the ball forward. What's wrong with letting the people, letting the people select if they want statehood independence or independence with free association? That is the democratic way, because if we continue to spin our wheels, we'll be another 125 years in the same boat.
No. I mean, and just, I mean, yeah, no, that's absolutely important. But how do we get to allow that democratic process to work, right?
So you believe in democracy, and you believe that the people should vote on this issue.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're running out of time, so I don't know if Nathaniel wants to do another question.
Well, yes. I like this feedback that I get from both of you. I think one issue that we could all agree, and I think it's a very broad agreement from all Puerto Ricans, no matter where you are in the mainland, Chicago, New York, Puerto Rico, Texas, and it's that finally, after multiple cases in the Supreme Court, after the application of PROMESA, fiscal oversight board in Puerto Rico, and just 100 years of the relation, 100+ year of the current relationship between Puerto Rico and the U.S. is that Puerto Rico is a territory. Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States. The 3.5 or 3.2 million American citizens in Puerto Rico are living in an island which is considered a colony in all senses. I don't know if you would define Puerto Rico as a colony in this relationship that we have with the United States at the level of social sciences. Politically, I think it is. And we could agree that this current territorial status / colony is not sustainable. It's not sustainable because it's a stain in the fabric of the republic, in which you have citizens that fight for your wars, that pay into the national treasury, that are part of your society. We have millions of Americans that are unable to have any say on how Congress enacts law. They have no representation in Congress whatsoever that at least I could vote. Right now, we have in the House of Representatives a key vote for a Speaker of the House that one or two members could decide. And we don't, Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico do not have a say on that election. And that's something that to me is extremely surprising. I favor that Puerto Ricans on the island are able to, by a federal mandated plebiscite, are able to choose between non-territorial options. And it is my wish that the hub could be in the front line, participating in the research on how either option could affect the social fabric of Puerto Ricans, not only in the island but also in the states. And I do believe that you're doing that these days. So in and we are making progress slowly.
No,
These
yeah, no, and absolutely, and that's why I like sort of Neil and his effort, because he's uniting all the territories. Because sometimes, and when you add that up, it's not only Puerto Ricans, but other people out there that are suffering the same conditions that Puerto Ricans are doing, and to a degree even worse. So there's like different ways to go about it. And I think that's a very notable approach. You're right. I think eventually the insular cases are going to get their day in court. I don't know how soon or not. Obviously, we cannot be blind to the realities that are happening in the United States right now in terms of politics and the dysfunction in Washington, the judicial activism, and all those type of things that are going on out there. But I think it's getting closer than it has ever before. But that's what I was saying, that we need to continue to keep an eye on the ball, and it's not going to be, like I always say, complicated problems require complicated solutions. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to be a single thing. It has to be a multiple type of things happening at the same time to create that pressure to really elevate it to the level that is going to make a difference. So it cannot be one thing here, let it die, one thing here. It has to be the legal, political, social, economic, international, humanitarian, all those type of level. And if we can if we can be sort of the platform where all those groups come together, and we can be sort of that place where people can find that information from all angles, I'm more than happy to do that for the future of Puerto Rico.
No, and one thing that I'm happy to see, the last Congress was the first time that a bill passed through the House that gave the chance for all Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico to vote for non-territorial, non-colonial status options. I think that's a big step. It passed with bipartisan support, mostly Democrats, but with some conservative Republicans also supporting the bill. So I think that progress is being made, and at some point, my opinion, at some point in the next 20, 25 years, maybe sooner, we'll see a final resolution of this issue before Congress. Now I'm going to leave it to Dennis for his
closing remarks. Well, we've gone over the clock, but it's good. It's been really a wonderful conversation and understanding of different perspectives of the facts and how the hub functions. So at this time, we would like to give Dr. Rivera some time for closing remarks.
No, like I was saying, again, thank you for having me and really enjoy the conversation. But yeah, no, we need to continue to let the research actually be the guide of what we do, and that's what we do at the Puerto Rico Research Hub. It's not what I like, it's not my opinion, it's what the research is telling us at all levels, right? What are the needs of the community that our research finds? What are sort of the major concerns of the Puerto Rican community here and there that people find? And I think we need to provide sort of that type of dialogue and sort of platform if we want to move forward, right? We always going to have differences, but we have to find those similarities to really move forward. Because if history is any indicator, we might be here for another 125 years. So we need to change the rhetoric. We need to try new things. And we need to continue to have the conversation and have, research facts and understanding of how the systems do actually work to move forward. And I think at the end of the day, what unites us is the love for Puerto Rico and the hope that things are going to get better and Puerto Rico is going to bounce back, and it's going to continue to be a wonderful place that we know it is, and that we continue to work towards that future.
Well, thank you very much, and we got to shine the light on the truth and facts, even if you like them or not. it's the facts are the facts. I would like to greatly thank Dr. Fernando Rivera for discussing the important aspects of the role of academia, Puerto Rico Research Hub in the fight for fairness and progress of Puerto Ricans. And I would also ask again to contribute to the Puerto Rico Research Hub that needs our strong support, needs volunteers and monetary through UCF Foundation, so it can conduct more studies on the Puerto Rican population that are a key to Puerto Rican inclusion, equality, progress, a better quality of life. For more information, please go to the Puerto Rico Research Hub. And if you don't get it now, Google it. It
Yeah.
is global.ucf.edu/Puerto Rico.
And you can
So,
and you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. Just type UCF Puerto Rico Research Hub, and the links to everything are out there. Our activities, what we've done. So make sure to do that. And even if you don't, nowadays with the social media world, a like, a share means a lot as well. So I encourage you and your audience to follow us and like us and follow us on our social media platforms, which is sort of becoming very important as we put, as we work with different activities in the future.
and
Uh, go
lastly,
ahead.
take civic action based on facts for a patriotic just cause, equal U.S. citizenship, equal rights, and an end to federal undemocratic control of Puerto Rico now. Thank you, and now to Nathaniel.
Thank you, Dennis. One thing that I wanted to add, and this is a message that I get from our chairman, Mr. Carrillo, who is in active duty army serving. He's texting me that to remind our audience, and you could probably expand upon this, is that the hub is also joining with the Roberto Clemente Foundation, and let me see, he's saying that they're accepting applications for internships right now for the 2023-2024 year. So, do you have any information about that maybe some of our viewers might be interested?
Yeah, no, so they can find it on our Instagram and Facebook pages. It's posted out there with all the information. And yeah, no, and yeah, and continue to follow us. We have a YouTube channel as well where we have different TV shows, presentations, all those type of things. So a lot of resources for the community, free of charge. Use them, share them, and let's elevate the dialogue and continue the conversation.
Okay, and thank you for all your job that you do at the hub. This Roberto Clemente Foundation is a great opportunity for interns to apply and to come to the university and have a work experience in the university. I will also have to remind our viewers, Roberto Clemente, not only a great baseball player, he was a vet. He was, I think, he was a former
U.S. Marine.
a
Hoorah!
Marine Corps veteran.
Hoorah!
Hurrah! Super fine. So, and funny thing about that, he was drafted while he was a resident of Puerto Rico. So he was one of many service members in Puerto Rico that did serve in the military honorably and could not vote for their commander in chief. So that's something that we need to address, hopefully in the near future. We at NAPREC would like to thank everyone who turned into our episode of Equality Talks. Please follow us and keep up with our advocacy efforts toward the full equality of the island through statehood by visiting our Facebook page at National Puerto Rican Equality Coalition, at Twitter, YouTube. Our YouTube is at Pre-Coalition, and our website at www.naprec.org. Our organization can also be reached via email at info@naprec.org. Thank you, Professor Rivera, and thank you, Dennis, for joining us tonight. And stay tuned for our next episode, which probably will be next month. Thank you for joining us today. Good night.